Charles Starkweather was born in Lincoln, Nebraska on November the 24th, 1938, the third of 7 children to Guy and Helen Starkweather. The Starkweathers were a respectable family with well-behaved children. Although his family came from a working-class background, they had always shelter and there was food on the table for the children. Guy Starkweather was by all accounts a mild-mannered man, a carpenter by trade, but was often unemployed due to rheumatoid arthritis in his hands. During these periods, Starkweather's mother supplemented the family income by working as a waitress. Charles had first attended Saratoga Elementary School, then Irving Middle School, and Lincoln High School in Lincoln. In contrast to his family life, Charles possessed no happy remembrances of his school days. Starkweather was born with genu varum, a mild birth defect that caused his legs to be misshapen. He also suffered from a speech impediment, which led to constant teasing by classmates. He was considered a slow learner and was accused of never applying himself, although in his teens it was discovered that he suffered from severe myopia that had drastically affected his vision for most of his life. There was only one activity at school in which young Charles excelled, and that was gym. It was gym class where he found a physical outlet for his growing rage against those who had bullied him. Charles used his newly found strength to begin bullying those who had once bullied him, and soon his rage stretched beyond those who had bullied him to anyone whom he happened to dislike. Starkweather soon went from being considered one of the most well-behaved teenagers in the community to one of the most troubled. His high school friend Bob Von Busch would later recall, "He could be the kindest person you ever seen. He'd do anything for you if he liked you. He was a hell of a lot of fun to be around too. Everything was just one big joke to him. But he had this other side. He could be mean as hell, cruel. If he saw some poor guy on the street who was bigger than he was, better looking or better dressed, he'd try to take the poor bastard down to his size." After viewing the film Rebel Without a Cause, Starkweather developed a James Dean fixation and began to style his hair and dress in a similar fashion to Dean. Charles related to Dean's rebellious screen persona, believing that he had found a kindred spirit of sorts, someone who had suffered torment similar to his own and whom he could admire. Charles developed a severe inferiority complex and became self-loathing and devoid of morals, believing that he was unable to do anything correctly and that his own inherent failures would cause him to live in misery. In 1956, 18-year-old Charles Starkweather was introduced to 13-year-old Carol Ann Fugate. Charles dropped out of Lincoln High School in his senior year and became employed at a Western Union newspaper warehouse. He sought employment there because the warehouse was located near Whittier Junior High School in Lincoln, where Carol was a student. The location of the warehouse allowed him to visit her every day after school. Charles was considered a poor worker, and his employer later recalled, "Sometimes you'd have to tell him something 2 or 3 times. Of all the employees in the warehouse, he was the dumbest man we had." Carol was a pretty girl with dark brown hair and a ready smile. She too had a wide streak of rebellion in her and a mercurial temper. She also was not much of a scholar and had failed a grade in elementary school. Even though her teachers considered her a slow learner, Charlie thought she was a wizard. He treated her like a goddess, and, probably because she was so young, she thought he was really cool and had no appreciation for his serious weaknesses. William Allen states, "She was impressed by his cars, his toughness, his looks, and, despite his poverty, the way he could give her almost anything she wanted." Charlie said that Carol meant more to him than anything had before. Without her, he would be thrust back into the world he hated so much. Carol almost even made him stop hating himself. He saw himself as reflected in her eyes, and he looked good. Charles taught Carol how to drive, and one day she crashed his 1949 Ford into another car. His father paid the damages as he was the legal owner of the vehicle. This caused an altercation between Charles and his father. Refusing to condone his son's behavior, he ordered him out of the family home and never to return. Charles decided to quit his job at the warehouse and then became employed as a garbage collector for minimum wage. One of the homes on his route was the residence of future talk show host Dick Cavett, and Charles had once met Cavett's father. Starkweather began progressing towards his nihilistic views on life, believing that his current situation was the final blueprint on how he would live the rest of his life. He believed that his life was rigidly controlled. He also saw that he would not be able to flee the desperate poverty which had characterized his working-class childhood, but instead would be condemned to repeat it, eventually finding himself a manual job, a wife, having children, and then simply dying. He used the garbage route to begin plotting bank robberies, and finally conceived his own personal philosophy, by which he lived the remainder of his short life.
Dead people are all on the same level.
On November the 30th, 1957, Charles went to a service station in Lincoln where he tried to purchase a stuffed toy dog for Carol on credit. Robert Colvert, the station attendant, refused to accept credit, and Charles left the station furious at the refusal. At 3 a.m. on December the 1st, he returned to the station with a 12-gauge shotgun. Initially, he left the weapon in the car, entered the station, and purchased cigarettes from Colvert. Starkweather left, drove down the road, turned around and returned yet again to the station, leaving the weapon in the car as he had previously. This time he purchased a pack of chewing gum and then once again left and drove away. He parked a distance away from the station, sported a red bandana underneath a hat, and then walked to the station with the shotgun and a canvas bag. He held Colvert at gunpoint and stole $100 from the cash register before forcing Colvert to walk back to his car with him. Starkweather drove Colvert to a remote area outside of Lincoln and forced him out of the car, at which point Colvert struggled with Starkweather and attempted to get hold of the shotgun. The shotgun fired in the scuffle, shooting Colvert in his kneecaps. Starkweather then killed the wounded Colvert with a shotgun blast to the head. Charles would later claim that in the aftermath of the murder, he believed that he had transcended his former self to reach a new place of existence, in which he was above and outside of the law. He confessed the robbery to Carroll immediately afterwards, claiming someone else had killed Colvert, which Carroll was not naive enough to believe. On January 21, 1958, Charles visited Carroll at her home in the Belmont neighborhood of Lincoln. Not finding her at home, he argued with Carroll's mother and stepfather, Velda and Marion Bartlett, who told him to stay away from their daughter. Charles went to a payphone, called Marion Bartlett's place of employment, and told them that he, Marion, was ill and would not be at work for a couple of days. Then he went back to Carroll's house and waited for her to come home from school. When Charlie told Carroll what had happened with her parents, she went into the house and argued with her mother. Charles followed her into the house. He said that Velda began hitting him again, shrieking that he had made Carroll pregnant. He hit Velda back and they struggled for a few minutes before Charles got his gun. At that moment, Marion Bartlett came into the room, allegedly with a claw hammer in his hand, and Starkweather shot him in the head. Then, Charlie claimed that Velda came at him with a huge knife. Starkweather shot her in the face. As if that was not enough, he rammed the butt of the rifle into her head a couple of times when she tried to get up to reach her baby. Then Charlie hit the baby with the rifle butt. Starkweather in a statement said,
I picked up that knife the old lady had, started to walk in the bedroom, and the little girl kept yelling, and I told her to shut up, and I started to walk again, and just turned around and threw the kitchen knife I had at her. They said it hit her in the throat, but I thought it hit her in the chest. I went on into the bedroom. Mr. Bartlett was moving round, so I tried to stab him in the throat, but the knife wouldn't go in, and I just hit the top part of it with my hand, and it went in.
Once the carnage was over and no life force remained in any of the victims, they hid the bodies in various locations behind the house. Velda's body was dragged out to the old outhouse and shoved down the toilet opening. Carroll's baby half-sister was put in a box that had been used for garbage and taken out to the outhouse as well. Marion Bartlett was dumped on the floor of the chicken coop. Once that was done, Carroll and Charlie cleaned up the blood and mess inside and spent the rest of the evening drinking Pepsi and eating potato chips. They stayed there in the house just a few yards away from the rotting corpses of Carroll's family for almost a week. Buying milk and bread on credit from the milkman every day, Charlie would also go down to the grocery store to buy a few other essentials. The couple remained in the house for 6 days, turning people away with a note written by Carroll and taped to the door that read,
Stay away. Everybody is sick with the flu. Velda Bartlett.
Carroll's grandmother became suspicious and contacted the Lincoln Police Department. When the police arrived on January the 27th, Charles and Carroll had already went on the run. Charles and Carroll drove to the Bennett, Nebraska farmhouse of 70-year-old Auguste Meyer, a Starkweather family friend whom Charles killed with a shotgun blast to the head. As they were fleeing the area, Charles and Carol drove their car into mud and abandoned the vehicle. When Robert Jensen and Carol King, two local teenagers, stopped to give them a ride, Charles forced them to drive back to an abandoned storm shelter in Bennett. There he put 6 bullets into Jensen's head. Jensen's girlfriend Carol King was shot once in the head. Her body was left half naked with her jeans and panties down around her ankles. She had been stabbed repeatedly in the abdomen and pubic area, but there was no evidence of semen in or around her vagina. While all of this was happening, Carol allegedly was sitting in the car. Charlie attributed the mutilation of King's body to Carol, who supposedly was angry with the dead girl for being sexually attractive to Starkweather. At another time, Charles claimed that it was Carol who shot and killed the King girl when he was away from the scene for a few minutes. The two then drove into a wealthier section of Lincoln, where they entered the home of industrialist C. Lauer and Clara Ward. Both Clara Ward and maid Lillian Fenkel were fatally stabbed. Charles later admitted throwing a knife at Ward. However, he accused Carol of inflicting the multiple stab wounds that were found on her body. He also accused Carol of fatally stabbing Fenkel, whose body also had multiple stab wounds. When Lauer returned home that evening, Charles shot him. Charles and Carol filled Lauer's black 1956 Packard with stolen jewelry from the house and fled Nebraska. Then he sat down to write a letter that was addressed to the law only. It was a twisted, illiterate tirade, confession, and attempt at self-justification.
I and Carol are sorry for what has happened, 'cause I have hurt everybody 'cause of it, and so has Carol. But I'm saying one thing, everybody that came out there was lucky they're not dead, even Carol's sister.
The murders caused an uproar within Lancaster County, with all law enforcement agencies in the region thrown into a house-by-house search for the killers. The governor of Nebraska contacted the Nebraska National Guard, and the Lincoln Chief of Police called for a block-by-block search of the city. Frequent sightings of the two were often reported, with charges of incompetence against the Lincoln Police Department for their inability to capture the two. Needing a new car because of the high profile of their Packard, they found traveling salesman Merle Collison sleeping in his Buick along the highway outside Douglas, Wyoming. After waking Collison, he was shot dead, with Charles accusing Carol of performing the coup de grace after his shotgun jammed. Charles claimed Carol was the most trigger-happy person he had ever met. The salesman's car had a push-pedal emergency brake, which was something new to Charles. While attempting to drive away, the car stalled. He tried to restart the engine without much luck. A passing motorist stopped to help. Charles then threatened him with the rifle and an altercation ensued. The deputy sheriff arrived at the scene at that moment. Carol ran to him yelling something to the effect of,
"It's Starkweather! He's gonna kill me!"
Charles tried to evade the police, exceeding speeds of 100 miles per hour. A bullet shattered the windshield and flying glass cut Charles on the ear. He then stopped abruptly and surrendered. He thought he'd been shot. Converse County Sheriff Earl Heflin said,
"He thought he was bleeding to death. That's why he stopped. That's the kind of yellow son of a bitch he is."
Both Starkweather and Fugate were captured in Douglas. Charles first claimed Carol was captured by him and had nothing to do with the murders. However, he changed his story several times, finally testifying at her trial that she was a willing participant. Carol has always maintained he was holding her hostage by threatening to kill her family, claiming she was unaware that they were already dead.
"She could have escaped any time she wanted,"
Starkweather said.
"I left her alone lots of times. Sometimes when I'd go in and get hamburgers, she would be sitting in the car with all the guns. There would have been nothing to stop her from running away."
Judge Harry A. Spencer did not believe that Fugate was held hostage by Starkweather, as she had many opportunities to escape. Starkweather received the death penalty for the murder of Robert Jensen, the only murder he was tried for, and Fugate received a life sentence on November the 21st, 1958. Her sentence was eventually commuted, allowing her to be paroled in June 1976. Charles Starkweather was executed in the electric chair at the Nebraska State Penitentiary in Lincoln, Nebraska at 12:01 a.m. on June 5, 1959. Carol Fugate was paroled in June 1976 after serving 18 years at the Nebraska Correctional Center for Women in York, Nebraska. She settled in Lansing, Michigan, where she changed her name and worked as a janitor at the Lansing Hospital. Fugate has remained stony silent and refuses to speak about her part in the crimes. Starkweather is buried in Wyuka Cemetery in Lincoln along with 5 of his victims, the Bartlett family and the Ward couple. He lived cruelly, and it went cruelly with him to the last. Offered a chance to donate his eyes, Starkweather retorted that,
"Nobody ever did anything for me when I was alive. Why should I help anyone when I'm dead?"
According to the Los Angeles Times, the doctor who was supposed to pronounce the prisoner dead himself suffered a fatal heart attack minutes before the execution. Carol Fugate had always dreamed of becoming a nurse and was a medical technician for nearly 20 years before retiring. Denied a full pardon in 1996, Fugate, 76, now lives a quiet, private life. She was seriously injured on August 5, 2013, in a single-vehicle accident near Teconcia, Michigan. Her husband, who was driving their sport utility vehicle when it went off the road and overturned, died at the scene of the accident. Well, my dear friends, I hope you enjoyed yet another vintage crime presentation. This time a little bit tamer, somewhat tamer than the last one. So what are your thoughts on these two? I have mixed feelings. I certainly do not condone their actions, which were absolutely despicable, taking innocent people's lives and especially little children. But I don't know. You look at Charles. He's a classic loser. He didn't have much going for him, did he? Really. I could see him nowadays being one of those high school rampage killers. If those two hadn't have met, would there have been that catalyst where they, that sparked off the killings? I think probably. I think somewhere along the line he would have. He might possibly have went on a killing rampage. He had a lot of anger and frustration at society. But once they got together, it was, I don't know, maybe it was like some unreal, like a video game nowadays where these teenage kids are shooting each other and shooting everybody else. I mean, Carol, in some of the photos, she looks tiny. She looks like this innocent little waif. You couldn't imagine being able to kill someone in cold blood. But then again, you look at some of the photos of her face, she looks very defiant. And I believe that Charles was telling the truth, that she was also equally involved in the killing. So I do believe that. Possibly because of her age, as I say, it might have been all unreal to her, like some sort of crazy adventure, like a dream. I don't know. I'm not in her mind. I'm not in his. I don't know what was going through their heads when they went on this rampage. Didn't they realize how it's going to end, how it was going to play out? I think she's very lucky that she didn't get the chair too. Obviously because of her age and her sex. That's what saved her from old Sparky, that's for sure. But then again, she's had to live with the conscience, with the guilty conscience that she, if she didn't participate directly, that she was there while her parents and her baby sister were killed, viciously killed in cold blood. So I couldn't imagine living with that myself, but there you go. Now, I don't know whether you already know this news. The timeline's a bit mixed up at the moment. I'm not sure whether this is already broadcast on YouTube because I'm editing this video, obviously, before I make the announcement. the announcement that I'm moving to another channel on YouTube because of YouTube's harassment against me, and I'm on their radar. Possibly I'll be on their radar at the next channel, but hey, I got nothing to lose. I'm earning no more money on YouTube. They've demonetized my whole channel very unfairly, but you will see that, or you already know that from the announcement I made. And I just want to let you know that Patreon remains the same. I'm going to be bringing more of a mixed bag now, because now basically I won't be uploading any new historical features to YouTube. They'll all be coming to Patreon, and so there's going to be things, you know, like the tragic artists like Camille Claudel and Elizabeth Siddell, things like that, different stories, hauntings, and the vintage crime, which are my viewers' favourites. Yeah, and I'm going to keep going here as long as I can, as long as the money stays up to a certain point. If it drops drastically off, because YouTube is desperately trying to bury me, shadow ban me. They're not notifying my viewers of uploads. They're unsubscribing my viewers, doing nasty things like that. So I don't know how long I'll go. If the monetary support drops off drastically, then I'll just have to stop and invest my energies in another direction. I hope that doesn't happen. Yeah, I mean, obviously, the mainstream viewers on YouTube have short attention spans. They just want to watch crap. There's crappy videos with robot voices that are a couple of minutes long, getting like way more views than me. I mean, they're earning big money on YouTube, and they just like got a few images. Some of the images are stolen. The ideas and the images stolen from my videos. They make them a few minutes long. My videos are a huge amount of work, and I know that people want to watch them, because I can see by my Patreon funding, compared to some channels that have 2.5 million subscribers, or 2 million, or 1 million, I look at their Patreon and they're getting a couple of $100. That tells me that, hey, stuff you, YouTube. My viewers, my elite viewers, they know what they want, and I'm very, very grateful for the support. And yeah, as I say, my videos are not really meant for YouTube. That's obvious. You know, there's gamers getting way more views than me. Yeah, maybe I'll take up maybe I'll make a gaming channel if this all fails, and just play games and do a running commentary. It's got me a bit disappointed, YouTube. A bit is an understatement. Anyway, you'll hear all this ramble on my announcement, and yeah, business as usual here. God bless you. Take care, and see you next time.